Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Giacopo. I'm the Director of National Shelter Outreach with Best Friends Animal Society. In a moment, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background, and we're going to talk about what we're going to be discussing today. But I want to just acknowledge my team members who are with me today. I was fortunate enough to swipe a couple of people from the fine county of Fulton County, Georgia. I have with me former Animal Control Officer Nick Walton and
Hello,
for
everybody.
and former Animal Control Officer and Dispatcher Anna Rains. So these we make up the field division here at Best Friends Animal Society. Just a little bit of background on myself, just so you guys know who you're talking to. And I also just want to throw this out there. This is a little unusual for me. Usually I'm standing in front of a group of people and it's a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more personal. So I like to do things a little informally and laugh and joke, and have a good time while we do this. But one of the things I've always, when I was an officer myself, I've been through trainings and I sat there and I wondered whether or not this guy trying to teach me something was ever in the field, has ever walked a mile in my shoes, has ever been out there knocking on doors and talking to people. It's not this, what I teach, I didn't read in a book. It's something that, I've lived and my team has all lived. So like I said, you can see the screen. I've been involved in animal welfare since 1988. I'm a former state police cruelty investigator in Massachusetts. Done a lot of work with Boston PD, community policing, anti-gang unit. Then I was the head of animal control, the chief animal control officer for Washington, D.C. for about a decade or so. I've been with the National Animal Care and Control Association for a couple of years, and the past year, since this past October, I was elected president of NACA. I'm not going to get too far into NACA, but if you guys aren't members, I would definitely suggest joining. To me, it brings unity and togetherness to the field of animal care and control, which I'm very passionate about. In 2017, I joined Best Friends, and we started a new program. Back then, Best Friends, if you're not familiar with Best Friends, they've historically worked with rescue groups. And then in the mid 2000s, we started working more with animal shelters and so forth, but we had never really done anything with animal control, particularly animal control field operations. And in 2007, through a series of conversations with senior leadership, they decided to start building a program where we could start working with animal control officers and helping them move to the next level in progress or whatever you want to call it. In my opinion, animal control has been left behind. Over the past, and I'm sure many of you who have been involved in this industry for the past, several years, shelter operations have advanced greatly over the past, especially since I started in 1988. But in the past 5, 10, 15 years, shelter operations has grown considerably. They've used data to make decisions on how to run programs, open adoptions, managed intake, increased foster care. The sheltering programs have really come a long way, and in all in an effort to reduce euthanasia, reduce intake, and better serve the community. But animal control has traditionally been left behind. We have, as a profession, and I know there are isolated areas, agencies. I don't know what you guys do and don't do. I just want to get that out there. I don't know. I could go through my entire presentation today. You guys could be looking at each other like, yeah, we do that every day. We do that every day. If that's the case, then that's great. And let's talk about how maybe we can help get to that next level. But there are far too many agencies now that animal field operations that haven't, and they've been doing the same thing for years and years and years and years and years with really no progress. They're viewed poorly in the community, which has always been a big thing to me. I hate the fact that in the communities that we're viewed as the bad guy, that we're viewed as the dog catchers that come out with the big nets and just pick up dogs and they go to the shelter and die. Unfortunately, again, I don't know about the reputation you guys have in your county, but that's still all too common throughout the country. And my job is to try and change that. I feel I have an obligation to try and change that. And we do that through a lot of these community-based programs. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today may sound like you may be looking at each other saying, God, that's going to be a lot of extra work on my plate. It's really not. What happens is what we want to do is make this stuff become muscle memory so that it just automatically happens. And yeah, it might add 5 or 10 minutes here or there, but what'll end up happening is your call volume will be reduced overall. And that's one of the biggest things I've noticed in the field of animal control is that we have difficulty implementing new programs because we're running around trying to put out fires every day, all day. And I'm sure you guys are the same. Your call logs are overwhelming, and you have to get from one call to the next as quickly as possible so you can clear your call log for the day. What we fail to see in the big picture is that when we start doing these types of programs, the call volume actually goes down. And I can say that by, I can prove that by asking you, how many times have you been to the same house for the same problem? Now, I can't see you right now, but I know most of you are nodding your head because if you've been an officer for more than 6 months, you've probably been to the same house for the same problem more than once. But if we go to that house once and solve the problem, we don't have to go back. And if you can just look at your call logs for the day and take out any call that's on there that isn't a new call, you'll see overall how much your call volume can drop. So what we're going to talk about today is doing field return to owner, finding a stray dog and getting it home without having it impounded. And the takeaways I want to leave you guys with today is the dogs that we pick up in the street, they live somewhere. Very rarely in this country, and admittedly there are some places, but very rarely are there packs of feral dogs running around. And usually when I hear that, it's when I see that, rather, it's in places like large desert, rural areas that have been maybe not practicing the most progressive or modern proven strategies in animal control. So the point of the fact is he lives somewhere. And we also, as animal control officers, we also have an obligation to help reduce shelter intake. And far too many officers that I've talked to, they say, well, I don't know, my job is to pick them up, bring them into the shelter, and what happens then from that point on is their problem, not my concern. And we used to think that way. And I used to think that way. I used to think that way because I think there was a part of it for me that it was almost like a defense mechanism, because I knew a lot of the animals I picked up, particularly, animals that weren't all that friendly, or animals that were, victims of abuse, that a lot of them would end up dying in the shelter. And for me, it was out of sight, out of mind. I did my job. Now the shelter's got their job to do. And we have to stop looking at it that way. We have to start looking at it as a team mentality. We have an obligation to help the shelter achieve their mission of reducing shelter euthanasia, reducing intake. And when I say reducing intake, the key to one of the biggest things about reducing intake is not just the reduction of euthanasia, but it's also giving the shelter staff the ability to dedicate additional resources to those animals that need it. So if you have a shelter overflowing with animals and a couple of them need a little bit of special attention, whether it's behavioral or medical, they may not be able to give those resources or allocate those resources to those animals because we just keep bringing animals in and in and in and in. And again, I don't know what your relationship with the shelter, but I remember every time I brought an animal into the shelter, they'd look at me like, great, what a jerk. He's bringing in another dog. They don't know what we do. They don't know why we're bringing them in. But once I started getting the reputation as only bringing in animals that absolutely needed to be brought in, my relationship with the shelter staff really improved dramatically. And that's something we can look forward to with these types of programs as well, because we could be doing more, and the other thing too is I don't want anyone in the room to think that I'm going out, I'm saying like, oh, if you find a dog, just bring them home and everyone's lovey and unicorns are falling from the freaking sky and all that. Officer discretion is key. You got someone who's a repeat offender and just won't listen and you can't work with, then yeah, you got to impound that dog. That dog poses a public safety threat. Yeah, you got to impound that dog. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the majority of dogs that we pick up running the streets, and the majority of dogs we pick up running the streets, and everyone knows it. Don't fall into that category. Yeah, there's a lot of repeat offenders, and we've maybe given warnings and we've talked to them and all that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But I don't want anyone to think that I'm just out there blatantly saying, bring every animal home, because that's not always the case. And I recognize that. I'm not naive, but we need to be part of the solution. And we can be, just by taking a couple of extra steps and looking at how we can help in certain ways. So with that, let's get into it. You know, part of our basic job description is picking up stray dogs, whatever you call them, stray, loose, free roaming, escaped, off leash, whatever. Everyone has different words and all that, but it all boils down to a dog running at large, right? RAL, that's what we used to call it in DC. That was I know animal control, we all love acronyms, right? So ours was RAL, running at large. And obviously the first thing we want to do is, you know, if they're not wearing a collar and tag, is scan them for a microchip. But do you guys have scanners in your trucks?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, great. That's perfect. And you know, so that's always going to be your first thing, is scanning them. And a lot of people, you know, just don't scan them properly. So we want to make sure that we're really scanning them as thoroughly as we can. Now, in this slide, obviously, I put a picture in there that depicts every dog we pick up. You know, when we try and scan them, they're sitting there nice and calm and letting us do that, right? I get it. I know. It's, you know, we just for visual sake, I gotta, you know, put that picture in there. And I know it's difficult, guys. And I know the dogs are popping around, especially if you got them on a catch pole, which, you know, brings up another point. I believe, you know, we use catch poles more than we should, but I'm not going to get into that today. That's a topic for another time. But generally speaking, we got to do the best we can at scanning an animal. And, you know, some of the SOPs that I work with agencies around the country include scanning the animal in the field, at intake, and any other time that animal is moved. So typically an animal should be scanned, you know, 4, 5, 6 times before it leaves the building. But we want to make sure that we're scanning it properly. But, you know, what happens now? You know, there's no tags, no microchip. Historically, our only option, we thought, was to impound. I know even in the beginning in DC, no microchip, no tag, that dog ended up in my truck and ended up in the shelter, you know. But over the past few years especially, a lot of people are saying, no, we don't have to do that. And this is just a sample list of agencies that I've worked with over the past 2 years that are doing some amazing work. And I'm gonna share with you what they're doing and some of their results. But these represent large agencies and small agencies. Edinburgh, Texas has a staff of 3 people, 3 officers, and they deal with a couple of thousand animals a year. Whereas Dallas, Texas, which you'll see next, their officers impounded over 20,000 stray dogs last year in FY19. I mean, I don't know what your stray numbers are, but when I saw Dallas's number, they impounded 20,341 stray dogs last year. My eyes almost popped out of my head. I mean, that's a huge number. That's more than most overall intake of shelters. But they're doing really great stuff, and you can see the numbers since they've implemented the program in fiscal year 17. Their field return to owner is doubling each year. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you think about, with that number of animals, they're running around like crazy every day, all day. If they can do it, just about anybody can do it. And the same with on the other end of the extreme. If Edinburgh, Texas can do this stuff with 3 officers running around trying to put out fires all day, if they can do it, anybody can do it. And to me, those are the 2 extremes. You know, and Dallas, you know, Dallas might not even be the biggest. I know they're one of the biggest in the country, but I mean, look at those numbers. Fort Worth, Texas, right next door to Dallas, same thing. You know, their numbers are multiplying each year on the field return owner, because they're advancing their program. You know, they're doing more than just checking for microchips and checking for collars and tags. Charlotte Mecklenburg in North Carolina, they're actually doing more return to owner in the field than they are through the shelter. You know, and Dr. Josh Fisher, the director over there, he's a friend of mine. You know, I was talking to him. They do knock and talks. They actually they canvass the neighborhood before they impound. You know, before they actually impound into the shelter. And the definition of impound we'll get into in a minute. But they're taking it to that level. Washoe County, Nevada. You know, same thing there. And I got to update these stats. But they're doing, again, more RTOs in the field than they are from the shelter. And they're definitely getting more animals home than not. Fulton County, Georgia, where my two teammates are from, you know, this is from the chief over there. And he believes that, you know, all this technology is great, but nothing beats just asking people on the street, knocking on doors. You know, in this time in our history, in our nation's history, everyone knows what's going on around the country, and people are calling for police to be more community engaged and more and so forth, to say the least. But this is what we're talking about. It's talking to people on the street, helping to trying to solve problems while you're out on the street, and without having to just go to the tried and tested, you know, proven not really to work all that well, just take them into the shelter. So, you know, some of the ways they do it is, and a lot of it sounds basic and a lot of it sounds easy, but it's things that we don't always think about as we go through our days blindly, just trying to get to the next call. You know, they do a lot of searching, you know, search the area for owners. They talk to people. They look for and post, you know, signs. They use door hangers. We use door hangers in DC. Social media. And this one really shocked me, just following them home. I mean, I would never even dream of following a dog home. I don't know if any of you guys, have any of you guys just followed a stray dog home?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Glad to hear. Yeah, I never thought about doing that. But this is a picture. I was with an officer in Pima County, Arizona, and this little dog was just walking down the street, and she just pulled over and followed the dog, and the dog kept looking over his shoulder, and, you know, scurrying along, followed it home. I had never seen that. And you know, we found out that the dog had gotten out through a faulty fence. We worked with the owner, which we're going to talk about, on fixing that, and we solved the problem right then and there. Some of the things that officers, you know, tend not to do, and I was surprised at how many officers I see that when they get a dog in their truck and they get back in their truck, they sit there and they do their paperwork, or they drive somewhere else to do their paperwork, but they have their windows rolled up. Now, I've worked in places like El Paso, Texas, where it was over 100 degrees, or Kennebunkport, Maine, where it was like 20 below zero, you know. So yeah, you want to roll those windows up and temperature control, because we're cold or hot, you know, as all giddy up. But if we roll the windows down, we tend to hear people calling out their dog's name. And I'm sure most of you are dog owners. What's the first thing you're going to do if you look into your backyard and see the gate is open and your dog is gone? You're going to run outside and you're going to start calling out the dog's name, right? But we as officers don't tend to try and listen for that. You know, people are always out and about. I was actually with one officer, and we got a call about a dog roaming at large, and we responded to it, and it was in a housing complex off a main road. And there weren't many houses or residences around it, so we believe that the dog came from this area. And we drove in, and there were a group of kids hanging out, skateboarding and all that. There were a couple of maintenance guys out there, and the officer never once rolled down their window and said, "Hey, have you guys seen a dog? Do you know who owns this dog?" You know, and we drove around, we saw the dog, and we went over, and, you know, the dog came to us willingly, you know, some do, luckily. And he picked the dog up, put it in the truck, and drove away. And as we were driving away, I asked him, I was like, what kind of, you know, do you ever engage with the community on who the dog might be? Especially, you know, some of the kids, the postal carriers, utility workers that are in the area, looking for visible evidence that a dog belongs there. Like, do you ever do any of this? And he was like, "No, I don't have time for it, man." But throughout the day, I realized we did have time. We did have time to roll down a window and say, "Hey, I just picked up a shepherd mix looking dog. Do you guys know who owns it?" Most of those kids are going to be like, "Yeah, you know, that's Henry. He gets out all the time, and he lives over there." Kids know the neighborhoods, and they're honest, and they do want to help out, but we just tend not to do that. you know? But when, and the bonus of all this is that when we start doing programs like this, when we start working on getting these animals home and not impounding them and really being visible in the community, taking those extra steps to get the animal home, we look better in the community. We look like the people we really are. We look like the heroes that we should be seen as. Those people that are out there trying to help animals and people. And it really helps the perception of us in the community. A lot of agencies, when you find a stray dog, you will call it in, call them to dispatch, or if you use the central command dispatch or your local police dispatch, however you guys are dispatched, a lot of people will just call it into the shelter. Call it in, see, have there been any loss reports filed? Because again, if your dog gets out, you run around the neighborhood, you can't find them. We teach everyone to do what? Call in a loss report, call the shelter, right? Post flyers. We train people to do this stuff, yet we don't even go looking for it half the time. So we want to call the shelter, say, hey, has anyone filed a loss report in the area? Have there been priors? Is this a repeat offender? Have we picked up this dog before? If no one has filed a loss report, you can file with the shelter saying, hey, I just picked up this dog. If anyone calls in a loss report, here's a found report. And we're going to talk about online stuff in a second, but the shelter staff, I was dealing with in Southern Texas, there's a shelter with multiple contracts, and they were having some difficulties with officers being able to really do a good field return owner program because of the number of calls they had to respond to, numbers of dogs being picked up. So what the shelter staff started doing was looking at how can they help. And now when an officer picks up a dog, they call in a found report to the shelter, and the shelter goes online at some of the places we're going to talk about in a second. And they start looking for people who have posted it, because the online presence, well, we'll get to that in a second. And in Dallas, Dallas actually has, if staffing allows, has a floating animal control officer come to the area where it was picked up, meet the responding officer, pick up the dog, so the officer on duty can respond to the other calls in the sector, and that officer canvasses the neighborhood. If there's no time for that officer, another officer fills in. And I would argue that we could even probably try and get some shelter help with that at some point in our history as well. Dallas has started, and now they have actually gotten the printer. But if you're an animal control officer in Dallas and you pick up a stray dog, you have a printer in your car that you take a picture of them, upload it, it prints out found dog flyers, and they post it on poles all around the area. And this is what's helping to lead Dallas in getting those animals home. This is what's helping their numbers fly, because again, if you lose your dog, what are you going to do? You're going to start running the neighborhood. You see this found dog flyer just got picked up. You call animal control. Hey, I saw this found dog flyer. My dog's missing. I think that's my dog. The officer's either still in the area, or the dispatch can call the officer and say, where are you headed? And I can have the owner meet you there. And I would almost never, I would say, have the officer have to drive all the way back. I don't believe in that. The owner can get in their own car and drive to wherever the officer is going, unless there's, special circumstances, elderly person, disabled, doesn't have vehicle. Nothing's ever black and white. But generally speaking, we should have the owner come meet the officer, on the other side of town or wherever it is, and do the RTO. And like I said, now they did get the printers, and they're having pictures put on of the dog on the flyers. Maricopa County, Arizona, they got a local sign company to donate these yard signs to them, and the officers have stacks of them in their trucks. And it's used like a whiteboard, or a dry erase board, or whatever the heck you call it. When you find a dog, you fill it out and you post it with permission, obviously, of the owner or the location. You post it where the dog was found. And again, it's the same thing, but all of these signs were donated by the sign company for free, because on the bottom somewhere it says donated courtesy of Scott's Sign Company or whatever the heck it is. And so it's free publicity. And then at some point, the officers just, either go back and pick them up, or the owner will bring them in, or they get the signs back. And even if they don't, it's no big deal. It's not a big loss. But so while they're there, they also take a picture of the dog in front of the sign and they post it on Twitter, which we're going to talk about next. In today's world, I mean, this certainly wasn't when I was an officer, on patrol and everything. I didn't have there wasn't much social media going on at the time. And in today's society, man, I got to tell you, the online opportunities for us to return animals to their home and so many other reasons for us to be online, it's amazing. It's where everybody goes for animal stuff. And a lot of people, while they're out looking for the dogs, will actually post online from their phone while they're out looking. And some of the first thing I always hear from officers is, well, I'm not going to post things online using my own personal Facebook account. I wouldn't either. But a lot of officers have created their own online presence or identity or profile, whatever the heck you want to call it, under their name as officer. Officer Hildy, ACO Michelle, a couple of good friends of mine have done that, and it's their professional profile that they use in their community. The community loves it. The community absolutely goes crazy over it, because now they have a face and have engagement. They talk to the officers online, and the officers are clear in all their posts saying, do not post complaints, emergency. I only respond to complaints through dispatch, and and all that other stuff that people would say is a bad reason to do this. But the reason they do that is because almost every single community in the country has Facebook lost pet pages in their individual communities. And again, I'm not as familiar with Montgomery County, but and I'm sure you guys probably know more, but if you don't, go onto Facebook and do a search for Montgomery County, Ohio, lost pets, and you'll see there's a couple of pages. Work with those people about being able to post from the field. Nextdoor.com. I'm not sure if you guys utilize this or not, but every municipal agency automatically has the ability to sign up for Nextdoor.com. If you're not familiar with that, Nextdoor.com is an online community that is designed for individual neighborhoods, and individual neighborhood only. You have to live in that neighborhood to have access to it. And but a municipal agency has access to all of them. And if you're assigned to a sector, you should, or have your dispatcher, however you guys plan on doing it, have them sign up so that when you take those pictures in the field, they can get uploaded right away to that neighborhood's Nextdoor.com. That is an amazing tool to get animals home. If you go on Nextdoor and start looking at all of the animal posts, you'll be amazed. If you haven't already, lost dog, hey, I saw this dog. Does anyone know who has, who lost this dog, or whose dog this is, or what have you. But it's not only lost animals. The first time I ever saw Nextdoor.com is when I was in DC, and I was going on with my officers in implementing more community engagement type programs. And one of my officers pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, Chief, let me show you what I found." And he brought me onto this Nextdoor.com, and there was a string that had started the night before about a coyote. Someone had seen a coyote, and in DC, that's a big deal, so, and there was panic, people like, oh my God, hide your babies and blah, 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 all that crap that you usually see when someone, something like that happens. And he went on and he posted, "Hey, everybody, Officer Martell, DC Animal Care and Control, appreciate the concern. Just want to let you know that there's nothing to be afraid of. A coyote out during the day doesn't mean that he has rabies. Here's a couple of good links for you guys to go on and check out, blah, blah, blah." And then he proposed having a photo contest in the neighborhood to see who could get the best picture of him, and he turned panic into, it was amazing. I mean, you guys get where I'm going with that. But it was an amazing thing that he was able to do just by going on there and being present on this on this site. There were talks about, there's a lot of animal communication going on in there. So I suggest if you haven't, check it out. And one of my all-time favorites is, again, going back to Maricopa County, creating a lost pet page using the county's GIS system. One of the problems we've encountered, and I don't have an answer for this, guys, is that with these Facebook lost pet pages, there's a bunch of them. For one community, like I live in Nashville now, originally from Boston, as I mentioned, but I live in Nashville now, and my girlfriend actually found a stray cat that we believe had been displaced after the tornado that came to our neighborhood. And for her to post it through all of these sites, it was difficult. Some of the Facebook people were rude. You can't just post on our site. You have to be approved. Blah blah blah. I mean, it can get difficult. I get it. And my only suggestion is trying to build up a relationship with those people so that you have some level of admin that you can add a lost or found flyer. Not the I'm not going to say it's easy, but it can be done. But so in Maricopa County, they said, the hell with all of you, and they started their own GIS page, which I'll show you in a second. But I want to touch on Twitter. Maricopa County has some real good success tweeting, and you can see the samples of the tweets that they post from the scene when they find it, and that's all they do. They snap a quick picture and they tweet on that. And here's a picture of the officer had found the guy had seen the tweet, reached out to the officer, and they were able, within minutes of finding the dog, the owner came and got the dog back. And it's hugely successful, as is their stray animal map tool. So I wish I could do a live version of it, but when you hover over these dots, they're either a lost or found cat or dog. So as an owner of an animal, if you live in Maricopa County, you can go on, as soon as your dog is missing, you can go on and post it to this GIS map. And if I could hover over, you'd see when you hover over it, a picture comes up with a description and contact information. As an officer, you can go in and post all your found animals up there. So as an owner, I can go in and say, okay, a dog was found not too far from me. I'm going to hover over all of these. Are any of those my dog? No. Okay, I'm going to post it. You find a dog, when you hover over any of those, the stray dog, yes, there's the owner right there. Boom, you got him. So Maricopa County said, the hell with all of you Facebook people, this is going to be what we promote. We're going to promote our own Twitter, Facebook, and this tool. And it's, as you saw from the numbers earlier, it's widely successful. And I'd love to see more agencies involved in doing something like this. Most large municipalities have some level of GIS for the county, whether it's the police using it for crime statistics. A lot of places you can go online and look at the crime maps. You can look at you can do like a lot of places even have sanitation maps and all these different things. A lot of communities have them. And it's just a matter of animal control reaching out to the local, IT department, the county IT department, and saying, gosh, this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to work with, do something with Maricopa County. And I know Maricopa County would be interested in working, would be helpful to help get that started. Again, I want to stress officer discretion, and I don't want anyone thinking that, I'm just out there trying to say, everyone should go home and all that. There are things we need to do to solve the problem, and it's not always handled in that way of just being, officer friendly, so to speak, But that should be our default to go to first. We should try and solve the problem first, and then if we can't, then move to the more traditional enforcement, empowerment, and all that. So, first of all, we want to know our laws. There are places where the definition of impound, again, guys, I don't know Montgomery County's laws or, how you guys interpret your laws, but that's something when you're looking at implementing programs like this, you have to look at. I was in Baytown, Texas recently, and we were talking about this particular program. And it turns out that in their law specifically says every animal control officer shall impound all animals found running at large and bring them to the county shelter. There's no room for discretion there, right? So now we're working on getting that law changed. In DC, it was all officers shall impound animals found running at large. So what we did in order to do a field return to owner program, and there's other communities that are doing this, is we redefined what impound meant, because impound wasn't clearly spelled out in the ordinance. We defined impound as soon as an animal puts their hand as soon as an officer puts their hand on an animal, it's considered impounded, and we met the definition of law. Because an impound doesn't necessarily mean bringing to the shelter. Impound can mean taking into the care and custody of animal control. And at that point, now you can do an RTO. You know, so again, that's something you guys look at and look really closely at your laws to determine what you can and can't do. And you know, you guys, I'm sure you guys all know the difference between when it says shall do or may do, has the authority to do. We have to look for our officer discretion. And the only time really we don't have discretion is when it says shall do this. At that point, you don't have discretion, and we have to start changing ordinances. But if it doesn't, or at that point, then that, like I said, that's when you can look at, okay, shall impound. What's impound mean? How do we define impound as an organization? Because we have that right as the animal control authority, unless there's a written opinion from the county attorney or the attorney general's office or case law that you have to adhere to. If something isn't clearly defined, it's up to you as the authority in the county for animal control to define that until told otherwise. Sorry about that. So just keep that in mind when you're looking through your laws. Look through the laws with an eye to what can we redefine and look at differently. We're talking about a field RTO. You can do that, or you don't have to. You can issue a citation. A couple of things I've seen out there. You can also do fix-it tickets. I don't know if you guys have the authority. If it doesn't clearly say you don't have the authority to do it, generally speaking, you have the authority to do it. So it's almost like a post-dated ticket where if you take care of A, B, and C before this date, the ticket will go away. And some of the creative things that are going on out there, and I actually did this in DC. I know Dallas is looking to do this. We worked, and again, getting back to the community engagement, community policing aspect of animal control, we built partnerships with local trainers and got volunteers to offer these types of classes. So what we would do is we would say, all right, so I've talked to you before. I'm going to give you a ticket. I'm going to give you a citation. If you go down to the local rec center, the community center this weekend, and go through this training class, we had volunteer trainers come in and offer a 2-hour, I think it was 2-hour, 1.5, 2-hour training class on how to walk your dog on a leash and basically basic manners and all that good stuff. If they successfully went through that class, the ticket would go away. Dallas does it if you get a fence. So so you can set these criteria as long as they're reasonable. And that's the other thing. A lot of the neighborhoods we work in, and I'm sure it's no different anywhere in the country. Montgomery County is probably no different. But you have areas of your community that are more what's called at-risk communities, and they might not have the money to build a fence this week. So we work with them, try and figure out how, with the resources they may have, that owner may have, how can we solve the problem? We may, work, we may actually help fix the fences. And I don't know if that's something you guys do, but, there are, and we'll get to that in a second, but there's a lot of agencies out there that carry tools. When you are conducting a field RTO, there's some stuff you want to have, make sure you have. If they're required with us, they had to do a full RTO, so they had to sign RTO documents no different than if they had come to the shelter. So we had to make sure that we had those available for the owners to sign, that we accepted custody of the animal back and all that. We also make sure that there are informational materials on dog training, on the various things that you might need. Always, spay neuter, licensing, or what, the local laws, whatever you guys have in place. You also want to help the owner identify how the dog got out and prevent it from happening again. We want to solve the problem. We talked about, your citation book, your fix-it tickets. You want to, if you have those stipulations, you want to make sure that you write them down. In order to get rid of this, in order to get this fixed, you have to attend the community workshop on basic dog training on Saturday at the community center down on 5th Street. Or the next one that's coming up, or you need to have the fixed fence by such and such a date. You want to make sure that you have extra leashes and collars. One of the things we did was we started asking people, and we couldn't really do this till we got to a point where we had a good reputation in the community, and people saw us as a resource and for help rather than bad guy coming to take animals away from you. But we started asking people why they repeatedly walked their dog off leash, and one of the most common things we heard was because the dog pulls and he pulls my arm out of the socket, he almost pulls me over, or I can't control him. Those are easy things for us to fix, and getting officers in the field that are doing this basic training on basic training can help. If you don't have an opportunity to get a trainer to do volunteer classes, there are YouTube videos. You can have informational handouts with YouTube links. Almost everybody nowadays has a smartphone where they can go online, and that's a given. So we can do it. But we want to have those opportunities. But for someone who says, you see someone walking down the street and they're using a rope or a chain, as a leash, and you have extra leashes, talk to them and give them a leash. That's going to build up your relationship with the community. That's going to build up your reputation in the community as someone that could help. And one of the things I'm really glad with all of the agencies that I've showed you, they track it. Far too many agencies don't track their data. And if you pick up a dog and you do a field RTO, we need to be able to celebrate that. We need to be able to show the community and any of our critics that that's what we're doing. That we're doing it, that we're out in the community helping. When I first took over animal control in DC, there was a whiteboard in the back, and that whiteboard had two columns. Every officer's name was listed, and there were two columns. One was the number of dogs impounded, and one was the number of cases cleared. And the culture had been, the more animals you pull off the street, the more animals you rescue. Right? The more animals you serve and save. And we were taking in about 12 to 14,000 animals a year, and only 28% of them were making it out alive. To me, that's not saving animals. That's not rescuing them. Right? We weren't doing what we needed to do. So what I did was I erased both columns and left one column, and I wrote field RTO. And I had the officers, I started developing the culture where the officers started to compete to see who could do the most field return to owners. And at the end of the month, and I know you guys, especially some of you veterans, are going to roll your eyes at this one, but hear me out because it had a lot of other benefits. At the end of the month, the officer with the most field RTOs, we had a celebration. What we did was we had a certificate made, a certificate of achievement or accommodation rather, for going above and beyond the call of duty. And we got a picture with the officer taken with me in my chief's uniform, which I hated, all the brass and, gold stars and all that crap. And we had a pizza party for the shelter. So the shelter could now celebrate their successes. And we posted that on Facebook. And we showed the community. And what happened, the reason I love this so much is because people started recognizing the officers in the field. And it showed that the officers are not the bad guys out there just pulling animals off the streets. You know, we're out there to get animals back home. We're out there solving problems. And it started really changing our reputation. It did wonders for our reputation in the community. So here's some pictures that were taken of officers fixing fences. Now, the middle one there, that's Shreveport, Louisiana. And when I first started working with them, they had a reputation in the community as the bad guys. And we went in and we started working with them on implementing these community-based programs, not just Field Return to Owner, but a lot of other programs that we work on. And so this guy here in the middle, this big guy in the middle there, Eric, good friend of mine, he came to one of our conferences and he won a scholarship at one of our conferences, and he decided to use the money that he won for fencing materials. And this is the first one they did. This is the Facebook post. But if you look at the bottom, it was 409 people were loved, and these were mostly community members. 86 people commented, all of them positive except for one. And the one comment that wasn't celebratory, congratulatory, or was, did this come out of our tax dollars? That's the only one. And Eric was proud to come back and say, no, this was funded by a grant, a grant we received, a scholarship I received at a conference, but really do believe that the city should fund things like this so that we can continue to help the community do better and increase public safety. Nobody wants to reduce public safety. Nobody wants to jeopardize public safety. That's why I even said at the beginning, if that animal is dangerous or poses a threat, you got to do what you got to do. That's what one of the reasons we're there is to protect public safety. But again, the majority of animals we deal with don't fall into that category. So, now that lower picture on the side is the owner in the middle, and she was so appreciative of because she didn't know how to fix the fence. A lot of people don't know how to fix a fence. They don't have the resources to do it. And the two officers on the sides there, those are both from Pima County, Arizona, and it's in their policy that if they find a broken fence, that they try and fix it, put the animal back, and try and fix it. They have each officer and a lot of agencies do this. They have toolkits in their trucks with all of the materials, zip ties. I don't know the names of, but those pieces of metal that you bend around with, pliers. They have all those tools to help fix fences, and it is hugely successful. Not only in reducing euthanasia, reducing intake, building relationships with shelter staff, and building relationships with the community. The community loves these guys, and they know that when they take an animal or when they make a mistake, which we all do, we all make mistakes. These guys, people like this, aren't as criticized much in social media and in the media itself. So we have two resources that we put out there that are free to download on this website. One is a whole humane animal control manual, and it outlines programs like Field Return to Owner, like community engagement, the role of animal control officers in society today. It's a whole manual. It covers a lot of shelter operation stuff, managed intake, volunteer programs, things like that. But that's a really good resource for animal control. And we also have what we call an operational playbook. On how to start one of these programs if you're not already doing it, which it sounds to me like you guys are already doing some of it. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions, but first I would like to ask, out of this presentation, how much of this stuff are you guys already doing?
Guys gonna chime in?
Speak up.
We're doing a good percentage. I mean, just following the dogs back to the house, asking community members, people when they're here to the host.
Good.
Here.
Yeah.
We check our lost and found page.
That's awesome.
So Scott, this is Bob. First of all, thanks for taking the time to do this for us. We greatly appreciate it. We're kind of on the burgeoning bubble, if you will, to get this thing going and to sustain it and embed it deep within the organization. This is, as you mentioned, this is a departure, not a departure, but it's an enhancement of some stuff that we've been doing for a number of years.
Right.
Well, we recognize that we can no longer keep impounding dogs in our community. That's the conversation you and I had a couple weeks ago, right?
Right.
So a lot of the stuff that we're doing already, we talked to owners about responsible pet ownership, fixing fences. I like the idea of going in that direction. I think the biggest area that I don't want to say struggling with, but we're just kind of opening the package on is the social media piece.
Right.
And how to really expand that capability. And, you know, obviously the officers have a role to play there, but I'm looking at targeting a public information official in our public information office to manage that piece for us. So how can my officers feed that person and they can run that show? And the number of, that's where I'm really, really interested, because as you said, that's going to get the most play in the community. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And Bob, when the time comes, if the time comes that you are having a meeting with your IT team, let us know. And I'd be more than happy to sit in on that meeting and offer some suggestions and work through that with you. You know, we're committed to helping you guys do this. So if that would be, if you consider that helpful, we're there for you. Either me or one of my team members, because we're all, you know, knowledgeable about this stuff. We'd be more than happy to help you out in any way we can.
Well, we appreciate that. And the second really focus is for me on the community front, right? So what I'm going to be asking my officers to do in the next several months is start getting more engaged with the community. And obviously you mentioned the tragic social events that are unfolding right now in our country. It's no different here in Dayton, Ohio and the surrounding areas. There's a lot of angst, there's a lot of anxiety out there with law enforcement, and so the engagement with the community. I'm currently meeting with law enforcement jurisdictions throughout all of them, not all of them, but most of them, where we intake the most number of animals, to set a new standard to plead for their help to do RTO alongside with us as a collaborator, not as an adversary. And that's really important. That's a really important message. Do you have any ideas or suggestions how to take that to another level and how to stay the course on that messaging?
Well, I think first and foremost, we want to look at the local ordinances that they have to abide by. I mean, at the end of the day, animal control does have to do what the law tells us we have to do. If there's no room for discretion, then we need to start working on those ordinances and looking at policies and interpretations. I think for me, that's always the first thing we want to look at is, are we able to do it, and what is our obstacle to doing it? From the policy and regulatory perspective. Once we do that, then we want to look at training. This workshop, the playbooks that I talked about, and then, once we get the officers trained and having these conversations, Bob, and not just with your department, but the other agencies, let's have a meeting. I'll be more than happy to remotely take part in a meeting. If you wanted to get the directors of these agencies, we sit down. I know Stacy's committed as well, but we're in this with you. So having a meeting, having those discussions and again, it goes back to, my messaging isn't always, and, it sounds funny coming from someone with Best Friends. I mean, Best Friends is the national leader in no-kill advocacy. I get that, right? That's not the biggest thing for me is reduction in euthanasia, and a lot of the stuff we do ultimately leads back to that. But for me personally, and Best Friends knows this, and they hired me, regardless. My objective is to get every person sitting in that room right now to be seen in the community as the good guy, as the hero, because that's what we do. I want to improve the image of animal control in the community. And the way we have been doing it, we're not. you know, and again, I know this may sound corny and sometimes I get eye rolls at this, but I was damn proud to be an officer. And I see too many officers now that just like they love their job, but they're not proud to be an officer. They're not proud to be an animal control officer, or you guys refer to, I think you guys are referred to as dog wardens. You know, we should be proud of that. We should be standing on our soapbox saying, I serve a critical, a vital community service. I serve my community. I help people and animals in my community. And I'm damn proud of it. But we get beat down. And when we get beat down, sometimes we allow that perception to take its own life within ourselves. We got to stop that. And it's programs like this that help us do that. When I see a dog owner of someone whose dog got out, hugging an officer rather than spitting on them, that's ideal to me. And so anyway, I don't want to get on my soapbox with that, but we will be willing to engage in these meetings. We will be willing to do training with you guys. But as far as the outskirts, you got to look at, getting all the stakeholders together at a table and saying, here's the problem, here's how it's been solved in other places, here's how we can solve it here. And you may end up with someone saying, not interested, thanks for the free coffee and pastries, bye.
Right. Yeah, we know that. I mean, our biggest thing is trying to send the message that this is a community issue, and that the Animal Resource Center here in Montgomery County, while it wants to do its job, certainly enforce the laws, do what it has to do, we can no longer continue to be the county's repository for all stray animals. And we just simply don't have the space. Right. So the issue, obviously several years ago, we got in a little bit of trouble and essentially euthanizing for space, that was the bottom line. And we don't do that anymore. So as we are standing up foster care programs and better enrichment programs and doing a better job on the adoption front, this is another tool in our toolbox to manage the intake and divert, right? So the proactive redemption we talked about. Right. So I mean, I'm hungry for my guys to learn as much as they can about what works. And one of the things we're going to continue to talk about, and I think was really important that you mentioned it, is tracking the data. Where are the hot spots, right? Who are the repeat offenders? What can we do to problem solve? So I just again want to say thank you for your time and your effort and your willingness to help us, because we do some great stuff. And my guys don't get enough credit for that. And just recently, when we went to this new mantra on June 1st, I've been looking at data every day. Our RTO right now, believe it or not, both in the field and at the shelter, is hovering around 25%, 29%, which is remarkable. Yeah. Because we've changed a little bit of our philosophy on how to connect these pets to the owners. And I've been, telling my community directors and law enforcement, as you said, the vast majority of these animals that come in are healthy and owned. And we just got to figure out as a community how to get them back to where they belong, rather than bring them in and then do the hard work on the back end to try and reunite.
Right. It's actually easier in the field while you're still there. And Bob, we have other programs. We do a program on implementing a community engagement program, or mindset, I should say. The terminology is always, something, how to word it is always confusing at times. But that whole community, I'm from the old school police department in Boston. I worked with the community policing unit in Boston, and I looked at how we could apply some of those principles to animal control. And I've been preaching this since the mid '90s, that community policing can be incorporated into animal control. And I've been doing it, and we've done it, and I've seen it done in other places that's really successful. So we offer training in that. The other thing is, if you have any relationships with the local police academy, whether that's county or however you guys work, ask the police academy if their police community policing instructors can teach the ACOs. Basic community policing stuff. And it'll give you an idea of how you can incorporate different techniques into the way we do our jobs on a daily basis. Because, you know, you said yourself, law enforcement officers, yeah, to a degree, we have to enforce the law, but the mindset we should be in is that enforcing the law should be our last option. Impounding that animal should be the last option. There are problems out there, and the great majority, and I say the great majority because I'm not naive. I know there are people out there that you got to move right to impounding that animal, locking that person up, or you know, charging, you know, filing criminal charges or whatever resources you have to put a stop to it right then and there. I get it. They're out there, and that's a part of our work. But we can't look at that as the majority and the norm. The norm is someone was careless and a kid was, you know, especially now during COVID when everyone's home, you know, someone left the gate open and the dog went for a walk. That's the norm. And we can't approach those two situations in the same manner. And you know, having that mindset of helping and solving the problem first is going to do far more for the organization, for the animals, for the community, than just popping them, taking them in the truck and writing a citation. But we offer workshops in that, and I hope, Bob, that our conversation continues long after today.
Oh, it most definitely will, Scott. We're gonna use and abuse you as much as we can. That's for sure. I mean, there's just so much we have to learn. And again, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. And you said it best. We have to unteach the community. And that's a big challenge, and it's a longitudinal challenge. And the message that I'm trying to send is we can't do it alone anymore. Even though we are a resource center, we need other advocates. We need allies, and both in law enforcement and the community. So again, I think some of these things are a great start. We're going to keep pursuing them. We're going to keep bothering you for more information and more training. I'm anxious to hear from your colleagues as well on what we can do. And as you said, you know, Stacy's right there with us, willing to help too. So we appreciate your time. We really do.
Yeah, no, this is an easy lift for me. I mean, it's, you know, it's first thing in the morning, banging out one of these training programs for an hour is nothing to me. I can do this anytime. So, you know, we can talk more about the training opportunities we offer and the workshops we offer, and we're there with you. We'll give you what we got.
Well, one of the things that I definitely want to do with you is have a little more of a conversation around getting your message out to law enforcement. One of the things that we are, my assistant county administrator, my boss, and myself are talking to law enforcement about is the provision of training for them in animal welfare, whether that be for handling, for RTO, for how to deal with strays, what our policies are. We want to give them tools. Well, like you said, you know, I'm preaching that this is a partnership, but it can't be one-sided. We have to offer support and tools, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to be working with you guys. I'm going to be working with the Humane Society in the United States, who has reached out and offered some training. Our guys are really they're rock stars in the field and how to handle animals, and combining all that and getting law enforcement the tools that they need. I'm hoping we'll get some traction, and other groups will be interested as well. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts later on about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, HSUS offers a hell of a training program as well, and we're all out there trying to do the same thing. So it's a good opportunity to take advantage of. Now, I'm going to say mine's better, of course. You know, I mean, hey, but no, they're a good group. I know most of them over there. Their law enforcement team are friends of mine, and they do damn good work. So you got the support. You got all the tools behind you that you need to make this happen. And the rest is up to you, your officers, your county administrators, and your community. But you have it. We're going to make sure you have everything you need to get the job done from the resource side.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate that, Scott. Anybody else? Anybody have any questions? All right, I guess we're going to wrap it up. Again, we want to thank you for your time on behalf of Montgomery County. I'm sure we'll be back in touch again as we move forward. So if there's anything else you want to add, take it away.
No, just want to remind all your officers, please stay safe out there. It's a dangerous world we're living in. It's more dangerous than it's been. We've always had a dangerous job, but just stay safe out there and take care of each other. So with that, if anyone has any questions, you can certainly reach out to me via email. Everyone, Bob, you have my email. I'm more than happy to talk to any one of you that has any questions. Feel free to reach out.